In this video, we're going to introduce the concept of congruence, and specifically, we're going to talk about what it means when we say that line segments are congruent. But basically, two or more things are congruent if they have the same shape and the same size. That means that line segments that have the same length are congruent. So if you're looking at a diagram, any line segments that have the same length are congruent to one another, and you can have multiple groups of congruent line segments. Rays can't be congruent to one another and lines can't be congruent to one another, and that's because neither of those have defined lengths. Remember, rays go to infinity in one direction, lines go to infinity in both directions, so yeah, no defined size for those, whereas line segments do have a defined length. Let's look at how we represent that things are congruent in diagrams and in writing. We'll start by looking at the brick diagram here. We have 7 different line segments and there are 3 different groupings of length. A group where the line segments have a length of 8, a group where they have a length of 10, and a group where they have a length of 12. Let's start by looking at the group with length of 8. That'll be CD, YZ, and PQ. To show that these are congruent, we're going to put one tick mark across each of them. Sometimes it's called a dash mark or congruence mark. They all basically mean the same thing. The important thing is how many of those marks there actually are. So yeah, first group there, we'll put one tick mark. And the tick marks are sometimes straight, sometimes slanted. Again, it's the number that matters. Then for our second group, I'll go with the group with length of 10. We'll put 2 tick marks on those. And then third group, we'll put 3 tick marks. If we had fourth group, we'd put 4, fifth group, we'd put 5, and so on. And I went with putting 1 tick mark on the group with the shortest length and 3 on the group with the longest length. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be reversed. The longer group could have had 1 tick mark and the shorter one 3. Just kind of depends on what works best for your situation or any instructions you're given in a problem. As you can see, when we put the tick marks into the diagram, it makes it much easier to visually see which line segments have the same lengths, especially if the lengths aren't shown. All right, I'll go ahead and add all the tick marks into our drawn out diagram as well, just so you can see what that looks like when drawn out. Next, let's talk about how we represent congruence in writing. What we do is we use a symbol that's like an equal sign with a squiggly line above. Squiggly line, I believe, is called a tilde. Let's go ahead and look at the group with IJ. It'll be line segment IJ is congruent to line segment AB. And that's how we'd write it out. For the third group, we would do basically the same thing. It would be line segment ST is congruent to line segment FG. And then for our group with 1 tick mark, the CD, YZ, and PQ, we have 3 of those, and we can just put in 2 congruent symbols. We would do line segment CD is congruent to line segment YZ is congruent to line segment PQ. There's also another way you can write it out that's a bit longer. I prefer this way. I think it's just easier to see. But you could also write it out as line segment CD is congruent to line segment YZ, and line segment CD is congruent to line segment PQ, and line segment YZ is congruent to line segment PQ. Those both say the same thing, it's just one shorter, one's longer. One more thing I wanted to mention here, let's look again at line segment IJ is congruent to line segment AB. When we use the congruent symbol, we're using it more and more like describing that things are the same size, same shape, versus when we're actually working with equations, that's when we just use the equal sign when we're just talking about the length. So the first part here would say line segment IJ is congruent to line segment AB. The second would say the length of IJ is equal to the length of AB. So that second one is what we'd use when we're actually working with equations, calculating things. All right, in our next video, we're going to talk about the midpoint of line segments and how that relates to the concept of congruence.